Yo, so guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to top 10 things the American government needs you to forget about. There's a lot of things I feel like they want people to forget about. I've done a few reactions to things recently, but in general there's stuff I guess involving like war or stuff within the US to like the general public. There's just loads of different things. I mean, I can't really think the government or the FBI, CIA, whoever you want to blame for certain things, they have a lot of control. And I guess we're going to see a lot of things that maybe I've heard about, maybe some that I've never heard about, some scandals, this and that. But let's check this out and see what's some of these things the American government have been doing and what they've been getting up to. And yeah, let's check this out. Links are also in the description to my Patreon where you can see reactions that I can't post to YouTube, like movies, TV series, all that good stuff. But let's check this out and see what the American government have been getting up to.
There were very strong editorials calling for an investigation of the FBI.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for 10 dark moments in American history that some, including the U.S. government, don't want us to remember.
I think that's the big thing that struck me. It was not really talked about.
Number 10, the Wilmington Coup. A violent mob,
Okay, well the first one I've never heard of.
many of whom were white supremacists, take over the government to overturn an election.
Their day of action would be January 6th, when Congress would count electoral ballots and ratify the 2020 election results.
Sound familiar? Well, we are of course talking about something that happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. Leading up to the 1898 elections, white supremacists were spun into violence by local newspapers like The Caucasian. Economic and racial resentments were blended into a rageful stew that boiled over when the African-American middle class extended its political muscle.
A state commission in 2006 had spent 5 years looking into this, and they estimated that at least 60 black men were killed that day, and dozens more were wounded. Hundreds of these families fled. They're terrified.
The government left black citizens undefended, and on election day, the white supremacists staged a violent insurrection. Over 2,000 black citizens were purged from the city, and 60 were lynched.
There's a tremendous amount of intimidation that is still felt by the black community.
It doesn't have to be mass mayhem and violence in the streets.
The strategy shifts towards designing state laws in such a way that you could exclude blacks from voter participation.
Number 9. How many were killed during Prohibition? At the turn of the 20th century, pietism spread through American Protestantism. Emphasizing individual righteousness, adherents proclaimed alcohol a demonic seed of societal ills.
Industrialists got behind the movement because they thought alcohol was limiting the potential
Has his voice just changed or have they just changed the rate? I'm so confused. It's just got louder.
output of their average worker. But temperance was also used by racist organizations as an outlet for their xenophobic views against the millions of European immigrants coming to the United States.
The movement spread through the halls of power.
That is insane. They purposely contaminated it to make it even worse, to stop people from drinking. Oh my god. Wild.
Number 8. Operation Fast and Furious. The ATF has long been the center of right-wing conspiracies about gun confiscation. It was shocking then when the debacle of Operation Fast and Furious revealed the agency to be behind a large gun proliferation scheme.
Fast and Furious began
means.
almost 3 years ago.
The ATF purposely allowed Arizona criminals to illegally buy thousands of guns. They were then to track the weapons to Mexico and follow them to drug cartels. Unfortunately, they lost track of hundreds of weapons, many of which turned up in Texas instead.
Initially, the Justice Department told Congress that they did not allow guns to flow into Mexico, but that was false.
One of those illegal AK-47s was used to murder a Border Patrol agent in Arizona in 2010. The program was terminated, and the agency raked over the media coals.
One official resigned and another was demoted, but though Holder has turned over thousands of documents, he's refusing to turn over additional ones Republicans call key to whether the Justice Department tried to cover up its involvement.
According to Mexico, the guns were used to kill or wound 150 Mexican citizens. Number 7. Installation and support of dictators. Through the years, many U.S. administrations have seen it as their duty to interfere with foreign powers. The right leadership in another country they believed could serve U.S. interests.
The list of countries where the U.S. has interfered is long. In 1893, the U.S. helped overthrow the Kingdom of Hawaii. 5 years later, in 1898, the U.S. invaded and occupied Cuba and Puerto Rico.
That often meant using American military, intelligence, and economic might to install dictatorships around the world. The long-term effects frequently resulted in enormous suffering, death, and inequality abroad.
The democracy produced the wrong person. So we like elections and democratic processes, but they have to produce the candidates we like, otherwise our approval disappears.
For example, when the West installed the Shah of Iran to help with oil prices, they didn't foresee an Islamist revolution against his regime that would turn the region into a tinderbox.
Khomeini is received as the new savior. No one has any idea of the consequences which the Islamic Revolution will have for the Iranian state.
Savage dictators on every continent, men like Batista, Somoza, Marcos, Mobutu, and Pinochet, owed their rise to U.S.
I mean, a fair few of them I've heard, and they definitely aren't regarded in a good light. God damn.
Interference. The reverberations and suffering are still felt today. Number 6, the Tuskegee Syphilis study. Government-sponsored dehumanization is a horrific thing. Few...
Wait, what? I've got to see that again. Wait. Syphilis study?
Government-sponsored dehumanization is a horrific thing. Few modern examples in the U.S. are as egregious as the 40-year Tuskegee Syphilis study. The CDC and the Public Health Service approached hundreds of black men in Alabama in 1932.
Free blood test, free treatment by county health department and government doctors. You may feel well and still have bad blood. Come and bring all your family.
Most of the 600 were poor sharecroppers who entered the study without informed consent. 2/3 of the men had syphilis but were never informed.
None of those 399 men were told they had syphilis. None of them were treated with effective panaceas. None of their families were ever warned, and none consented to take part.
Instead, they were given placebos and monitored for decades to study the disease's effects.
What?
Hundreds of them died without knowing they were ever sick. 40.
That is insane. What the fuck? This is actually sickening. And these sorts of things probably happen all around the world in different cases. And it just makes you think, wow, they really did use people as dummies. But in this case, they specifically targeted people to use, which is just, it's horrific to even think about.
He transmitted the disease to their wives, 19 to their babies. It took a whistleblower to reveal and end the program in 1972.
Congress investigated, and victims were paid around $10,000 each in compensation.
Number 5.
I mean, the compensation is not going to help that, but $10,000 even in those times. I'm wanting fucking tens of millions of dollars at that point. I mean, you're probably not going to get it because the law's not built to help people in that way, but that is wild.
Sand Creek Massacre. Modern-day Colorado evokes images of hippies, legal marijuana, and winter sports. Once, though, it was home to the Arapaho and Cheyenne peoples. In 1864, the 3rd Colorado Cavalry, under the auspices of the U.S. Army, attacked a native village at Sand Creek.
At dawn on November 29th, Shivington and 700 men attacked the peaceful village of Sand Creek. The massacre would last for hours.
Led by a racist colonel named John Shivington, these soldiers committed true horrors. They slaughtered hundreds of people.
This is the site of the Sand Creek Massacre near Eads, Colorado.
The deadliest day in Colorado history, November 29, 1864, when more than 230 Cheyenne and Arapaho, mostly women, children, and elders, were massacred by the United States Army.
Worse, they desecrated the bodies of the dead and often kept gory keepsakes. Many of them would later be found as curiosities being sold in Denver shops. It took more than a century to finally remember Sand Creek for what it was. Not a battle won by our valorous army, but a crime against humanity.
It's important that people walk away understanding that the Cheyenne and Arapaho had a vibrant, thriving cultures before the massacre, and that they still do today.
Number 4, MK Ultra. By now, the MK
Ultra, what was this again? I've heard of this, I can't remember what it was. For some reason I'm thinking of thalidomide, which it isn't that. Thalidomide was in a similar sort of era though, I think. but that was given to pregnant women, right? And then the kids were born with deformities and all that sort of stuff. What was MK Ultra?
The Ultra program is a fairly well-known blemish on the history of the U.S. government. At the height of the Cold War, the CIA spent 2 decades illegally experimenting on private citizens without their consent.
In the early days of the Cold War, the CIA ordered the creation of a secret program intended to find ways of mind control.
Oh, mind control. Okay, yeah. I've heard of this stuff. I mean, yeah, wild as well.
Both Americans and foreign citizens were subjected to biochemical and psychological experiments. Volunteers, students, and even customers at government-run brothels in San Francisco were dosed with LSD.
It was the most secret program ever conducted by the CIA in the United States. Patients at psychiatric hospitals, prisoners in federal institutions, and even people in the public were given drugs without their awareness.
Heck, the agency even dosed their own employees. Meant to discover truth serums, interrogation techniques, and sleeper agents, MK Ultra destroyed hundreds of lives. Subproject 68 in Canada, for example, saw a doctor forcing medical comas on patients just seeking psychological therapy.
What?
The program was so politically toxic by its end that the CIA director ordered most documentation destroyed.
During those hearings, the CIA finally admitted that this program existed. They admitted that it was probably not the right thing to do, but they feigned innocence.
Number 3, COINTELPRO. Longtime FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover saw the civil rights movement as a communist-adjacent threat to American power. He created the Counterintelligence Program, aka COINTELPRO, to empower FBI agents to surveil civil rights leaders and infiltrate and undermine their organizations.
I learned about what he was doing yesterday just to MLK, but I assume it was with lots of other people as well.
Secret FBI memos made public today show that the late J. Edgar Hoover ordered a nationwide campaign to disrupt the activities of the New Left without telling any of his superiors.
The program was a...
When you think about it, the CIA and the FBI have really just done something. They just do horrible things. Again, their national security, I assume they've done things that have benefited the country, but overall they just seem to affect the population or target certain people, especially in the past. I don't really know how they're viewed now. I don't think people trust them now, right? Like, I always hear things of like the FBI watching you through your phone camera and stuff. But in reality, they really do have a bit too much control, don't you think? It's a bit wild to say the least, but I guess it's now a point where there's no return, right? I mean, you say that, I assume there is a return, but I guess people are just so used to it, nothing's going to change. I don't know how to sort of view them, because again, the US is a country that faces so much stuff where you will need this sort of secretive sort of group of the secretive organization that have to like sort of, I guess, keep people safe. But do they actually truly do that? Who really knows, right? But I mean, it's pretty wild to think, because they've just done some insane things from the past. I wonder what sort of things they're doing now, because they're so secretive. You don't really know what they're doing ever. You'd like to think they've changed their ways, but you just don't know, do you?
Bipartisan 15-year effort spanning 4 presidencies. The program targeted the Black Panthers in particular to devastating effect. The FBI aided in the assassination of Black Panther leader Fred Hampton in 1969.
With help from an FBI informant, Chicago police raided the apartment on the city's west side, killing Hampton and Mark Clark and injuring several others.
They also destroyed the organization's popular Free Breakfast for Children program. Thanks to a coordinated disinformation and crackdown campaign by the FBI and local police, the program was destroyed.
The FBI labeled the party a black nationalist hate group, using its counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, to try to disrupt the organization from within.
Number 2, the U.S. covered up the war crimes of Imperial Japan. American history portrays the U.S. as the great heroic force that took down global fascism in 1945.
I mean, I feel like every country was doing war crimes during the World Wars. It's not making it any better, because it's just horrible. During the World Wars, the things that happened were beyond, like, you can't really describe, right? But I feel like every country was doing these horrific things, war crimes, etc., which is obviously just sad, but that's just how it was, right?
5. While that is true, it ignores the dark and secret aftermath of the war. With Operation Paperclip, The U.S. competed with the Soviets to repatriate top Nazi scientists and intelligence officials.
In the years following the
Everyone
war,
knows this.
the U.S. military's Project Paperclip brought more than 100 German scientists and engineers to America.
Even worse occurred during their occupation and rebuilding of Japan, as the U.S. government learned about Japanese atrocities during the war. Japan's Unit 731 in particular was a factory of horrors.
Unit 731 was notorious for experimenting on live humans in order to develop biological weapons.
They conducted many illegal human experiments on Chinese and Russian civilians and POWs. Evidence of their biological and chemical weapons tests were classified by the Americans, and perpetrators received pardons by the U.S. government. Thousands of deaths.
Oh, the Japanese committed war crimes on their own. Okay, I thought it was just saying the U.S. committed war crimes on Japan. Oh, damn.
Covered up.
It's rather difficult to find evidence of the crimes or investigate the historical truth. We have long been searching for victims in China, but their words are only part of the evidence.
Before we continue, be sure to listen to be and switch on Massacre. Cations.
Tulsa Race. Never heard of this.
Number 1. Tulsa Race Massacre. There was a thriving African-American community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, called Black Wall Street by many.
The district was lined with black-owned shops, restaurants, 2 newspapers, a 54-room Grand Hotel, a hospital, and the Dreamland Theater, which would soon boast air conditioning.
The summer of 1921 saw its demise at the hands of white supremacists.
So it was thriving, I guess in this sort of time they found their they had their own area for their own sort of, to just feel a bit safer, to feel like they have their rights. Because I assume in these sorts of times, you're mixed in with other communities, you're definitely not going to be having the same, rights and things like this. But this is just like, goddamn, this is only 100 years ago. Like, when you really think about it, it's not that long ago. Flipping hell.
Supremacist terrorism. Mobs of white residents, many of whom were municipal officials, attacked their black neighborhoods. Black homes and businesses were put to the torch. Firebombs and bullets were dropped from the air.
And he hears planes circling and sees roofs of buildings catching fire. And these are from turpentine balls, burning turpentine balls dropped from planes.
35 square blocks of the Greenwood district were destroyed. Hundreds were injured, many were killed, and many more were displaced. Many Americans had never heard of the Tulsa Race Massacre until HBO's The Watchmen, indicating a severe lapse in the educational system. Jesus. Recent debates over controversial Florida education laws have brought a similar incident, the Rosewood Massacre, to the force.
Within hours, that accusation ignited an angry mob. It invaded and attacked Rosewood.
Burned it to the ground, and there were approximately 5 blacks killed.
If America is ever going to live up to its ideals, it must confront and learn from dark periods of its past.
Damn, man. That is wild. Well, there you go. This is just a small little look into some pretty wild things in the US history. Thank you for calling the Tulsa Massacre what it is, terrorism. Unit 731 should be studied in American schools, so history can't be repeated. Nobody likes bad memories, but it's better to learn from them. Watch Mojo must have some guts to mention the things the government wants to keep forgotten. I don't think they're going to get in that much trouble, are they? Especially if they're all things that are well known. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. I'm going to be honest, I knew about, honestly, maybe 2 of these? 3 of these maybe? The Nazi, what do you call them? Like scientists, America bringing them and like helping them. I knew that one. And also the mind control stuff. But yeah, I learned about a lot here. And it's crazy for a country that's not so old to have such an insane history. And there's so many more things you could put here. Yeah, it's like the US is like obviously a newish country. Yet you've got all these events squeezed into the US's history that you could probably have in another country that's been around for 800 years or whatever, like just a longer time. But it's just so many more like wild stories. But yeah, that's that. Until next time, peace.